Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the ISO, we'd like to welcome you to today's Day-Ahead Market Enhancements Configurable Parameters Implementation Working Group meeting. My name is Christina Guimera, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs. Just a few friendly reminders before we get started today. Today's call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only, and any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. This working group is intended to stimulate open dialogue and engage different perspectives. Please remember to keep your comments professional and respectful today. For raising your hand during the meeting, the raise hand icon is now directly at the bottom of your WebEx screen. If you joined audio only, please press *3 on your device. And there is a new Inteller or Transparency viewer at the bottom right to see other attendees on the call. And closed captioning is also now available by clicking the CC button on the bottom left of your screen. Please remember to state your name and affiliation first before making a comment. And you can also send comments and questions via chat to all panelists or to myself directly. If you need any technical assistance during the meeting today, please send a chat to Inteller Events, the web producer. For today's discussion, Isabella Mahane will be taking us into some background information and meeting objectives. Then Jenny Araj, Daniel Jang, Scott Lemon, Austin Thomas, and Guillermo Bautista Alderete will lead us through on an analysis on DAME configurable parameters. And then we will wrap up for the day with next steps. So with that, I'll turn things over to Isabella to get us started.
Thanks, Christina, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for session 4 of the DAME Configurable Parameters Implementation Working Group. My name is Isabella Mahane. I am an account manager on the stakeholder engagement team and also a facilitator for this working group effort. So before we get started, just wanted to go over some of the purpose and goals for this session. So before we kick off and dive into the analysis for the configurable parameters, we're going to start with just the purpose of an implementation working group and speak more generally to the background and meeting objectives and also some specific objectives we have for this session. So if we can go to the next slide. This is a graphic of the California ISO's overall stakeholder process. So I know many of you are involved in the working groups and meetings that occur during the proposal development phase of the process and the decision phase when going through the FERC tariff filings and things like that. This working group is over in the implementation phase of the process. So it is coinciding with market simulation and training efforts that are currently happening for DAME and ADAM. So if we go to the next slide, we can speak a little bit more generally of what is an implementation working group. Okay, so more generally, the purpose of the implementation working group is really to gain participant feedback on specific issues pertaining to a project's implementation. So these issues could cover business process options for interaction with the ISO, feedback on technical information before final decisions are made, options for parameters used in calculations, and other options that match approved policy implementation. So the implementation working group is an optional step in project implementation, so not all projects will have one. Whether or not one will occur is usually communicated through the release user group form. So a couple items of what an implementation working group is not. So an implementation working group is not an area to debate approved policies or tariff language. Really the goal here is to gather feedback on final process or system changes so that participants will have a better understanding of how the implementation will perform much sooner than go live. And the implementation is also not the release user group, which provides project planning and tracking information. And it's also not the technical user group, which is an area to brainstorm and evaluate solutions for technology and process-based problems for ISO development of prioritized technical roadmaps. And it's also not the settlements user group, right? So the settlement user group discusses settlement-specific topics and has a specific user base participating in those meetings. We'd also like to note that the implementation working group is not a forum to discuss issues related to market simulation or parallel operations setup. So those questions specific to MarketSim should be directed to the MarketSim team, either through Citi or through emailing them directly at marketsim@CAISO.com. We also do have weekly DAME, EDM, and EDM CAISO BA MarketSim meeting series going on now, hosted every Monday and Thursday. And then lastly, this working group is not a forum to discuss any issues related to data quality in market simulation or parallel operations. So analysis during MarketSim is limited and sensitive to the data quality that's available in the simulation environment. The conclusions of this working group effort will be based on non-production quality data. This is something that the CAISO is cognizant of, but also needs to balance that with the need to perform the assessment of the functionality and the effect of the different parameters within the scope of the working group. So the ISO will continue to assess these parameters after go live, just as we are during this working group. Next slide. All right, so a little bit more specific to the working group session today and the engagement objectives for the DAME Configurable Parameters Implementation Working Group series. We really would like this working group to review and assess the results of analysis scenarios, provide feedback and observations of scenario results from analysis of each of the 5 configurable parameters, and then lastly, make recommendations on parameter changes and refinements based on data-driven results from market analysis. So I encourage all of you to keep these engagement objectives in mind as we go through the various presentations today. Next slide. Okay, so the implementation working group schedule, I know we've kind of covered this slide a couple working groups now. So this planned timeline for the working group does align with the overall implementation schedule of DAME and EDM. So although the working group effort is occurring concurrent to MarketSim and parallel ops, it is an independent effort. It's not dependent, the MarketSim and parallel ops are not dependent on the outcomes of this working group, although the working group does leverage MarketSim and parallel operations efforts to set up the scenarios for analysis and tuning of the parameters. So again, any specific questions specifically related to MarketSim should be directed to the MarketSim team through Citi or that direct email address, marketsim@caiso.com, or through those weekly MarketSim meetings on Mondays and Thursdays. So as you can see down here in the graphic, we are here at the first kind of monthly meeting to discuss the configurable parameters here at October 25. We'll continue to have these working groups through March 2026, with the focus of the working groups kind of shifting from analysis and map stage to fine-tuning of the parameters and parallel operations starting in January. All right. So I think that's my last slide on kind of background and meeting objectives. So I'll pause here to see if there are any questions before turning things over to Guillermo for a little bit more background on what we'll be discussing today.
Thanks, Isabella. So first, we received a question in the chat asking if this meeting is recorded, and yes, it is being recorded. Then we next have a hand raised from Jordan. Go ahead, Jordan.
DBUC. Just trying to get the call-in number working. It's not working. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for flagging that. We'll work to get that up and running. Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, I'll turn things over to you, Guillermo.
Thank you, Isabella, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the time for this discussion today regarding the configurable parameters. We can move to the next slide, please. Let's start with some background. Several of you have participated in previous working group sessions, so you may be up to speed. This is to level field the understanding and expectations of what the scope and intent of this effort is about. As you may recall, the CAISO committed by the time we got the final approval for the policy and its implementation for the day-ahead market enhancements. There were 5 specific parameters that were within the scope of concerns about the process and the approach that the CAISO would use to determine what values these parameters would have to go live in the extended day-ahead market in May 2026. And the concern was mainly because depending what values these parameters may take, it could influence one way or the other the market solution. Part of the commitment was to have a collaborative process through this working group effort with participants to socialize the interplays, the dynamics that we can observe by setting those parameters to different values. And we went and implemented this working group effort that initiated back in August 2024. And here we are now with the first most formal process session where we're going to start discussing actual analysis performed on the day-ahead market solution. The 5 parameters that we committed to assess are in this presentation. They go from as simple as defining what set of transmission constraints we are going to be activated for the deployment scenarios of imbalance reserves. Also, the proportion, what percentage is going to be set for the deployment of reserves when we are assessing the deployment scenarios. There are 2 parameters associated with the 55 value price that we use for both the bid cap that sets the cap of how high participants can bid for imbalance reserves, and also for use in the default bid price. These 2 specific parameters are already defined in the tariff, and it would have to be a very consequential finding that we go through this effort to determine that potentially we have to change those values, having to go through a tariff process change prior to go live. As I indicated in the previous rounds, most likely we're going to stay with these values as it is for the go live. However, we're going to be doing the diligence to assess what is the implication of using these specific values of $55 for the overall market solution. The last parameter is the envelope constraint multiplier. That is a factor that influences the solution for storage resources when they get awarded imbalance reserves. All these 5 parameters are specifically within the scope of this effort. Now, for those who participated in previous rounds of this working group, you may recall that at least in the first and second rounds of discussion, there were several inquiries and requests to extend the assessment of these parameters to other inputs that could eventually influence also the solution of the day-ahead market enhancement. We indicated that the specific scope of this working group is limited to these 5 parameters. However, we recognize that there are many other factors that could play a role in the quality of the solution for the day-ahead market. And therefore, we are open and considering to assess these other implications. There were concerns about the battery performance once we go into the operation of those into the real time. There were other considerations about congestion management and the cost of that and regarding this day-ahead market solution. There was another inquiry about the potential utilization of imbalance reserves or hydro resources, and so on. All these are memorialized in the comments and responses that we provided in the previous round. Again, the main scope of this effort is limited to the 5 parameters that you have in this slide. That is our priority to assess. That said, we are open and we will consider potentially assessing the solutions and the implications of other factors, other inputs that may rightfully influence the market solution. They are going to be in the second tier of priority for this effort. Next slide, please. Now, out of these 5 parameters, as you may recall, by the time we scheduled the process, originally we indicated that we wanted to assess this performance, these parameters, mainly relying on information from parallel operations. One of the main concerns we heard from that is that was kind of too tight in a schedule, too late to realize how the market could be impacted by changing these parameters. And therefore, there was a lot of requests from participants to expand the timeline for doing this type of analysis. That is the reason we stretch the timeline for these working groups. Rather than starting in January 2026, we are starting now, and that gives us an extra 3 rounds of analysis. We have in total 6 rounds of analysis. We are expecting to use the first 3 or 4 to define what parameters we are going to be using for parallel operations. And through parallel operations, we are going to further tune these values to define eventually what are the final values that we are going to be using for the go live. That is the sequence how we are approaching this. We are building up incrementally the effort, the analysis, going from the most basic foundational aspect of the market solution all the way up to reaching the parallel operations where we can confidently define what parameters we're going to use. So setting expectations here, we are not expecting to draw a conclusion in this call, neither in the next one. This is exploratory in nature, given the challenges and the limitations that we have in terms of the solution, the data that we can use as of now, which is highly relying on data that we grab from the market simulation environment. As I indicated in the previous rounds, there are some trade-offs that we have to make between, one, being able to provide analysis as early as of now, versus two, the quality of the data that we have to deal with to be able to put results that can be logical to explain, to understand. I want also to highlight the intent of this effort. This is not an effort to foresee, to project how the market solution is going to look like for day one of EDAM on May 1st, 2026. This is not an exercise to have this crystal ball to foresee what the costs are going to be. There are many inputs, as you may realize with the extended day-ahead market, that are going to have an influence how eventually the production-based solutions are going to look like. All this exercise we are doing from this session all the way through the last session of March is to really gain understanding how these parameters influence the solution. And based on that, be able to determine what are the reasonable values we can use for these different parameters. With that said, for the scope of this working group today, we are not going to cover all 5 items in the working group. We're going to focus mainly in 3 parts. 2 of these parts are touching on 2 specific configurable parameters. We're going to spend a good deal of time going into the analysis we have carried out for assessing the interplays of the envelope constraint multipliers, how that affects the solution of the day-ahead market specific to storage resources. The last part of the presentation is going to touch a little bit, not specifically on the bid cap, but mostly on the interplay of the imbalance reserve prices and how those bids impact the market solution and the market prices. In the subsequent rounds, given where we are right now, how we are building up the scenarios, we would be able to go deeper into the bid cap analysis and then move into the default bid price, and then we can start the exploration of the other parameters. This is the first attempt, and I think that we internally discussed how to portray this analysis. Now, it is an interesting time because there is not much experience and information out there to really understand how the day-ahead market enhancement, and more specifically, the extended day-ahead market solution looks like. Trying to connect the dots, trying to understand what the solution means, how that solution makes sense. And that's the reason that the first part out of these 3 parts that I indicated is actually at the more basic level. The first part of this presentation goes first into the setup of the study case that we have, what we call the benchmark, and then the complementary part of this first section is all about giving you some context how the market solution looks like, how you can rationalize the results of the market simulation that we did for this specific effort, trying to give you the logical rationale, how these prices make sense, why the prices are what they are, how the solution for these patches are being set for different resources, for different conditions, really starting from the foundational aspect of understanding the solution of the extended day-ahead market. We believe this is critical to pave the way to be able to have more sophisticated discussions for more complex interactions that we're going to be dealing with once we start going deeper into the assessment of these parameters. I think that would be a good use of our time for this first session to bring you all up to speed for these basics of the day-ahead market solution. And from there, we just keep building up on the scenarios and the conditions that we're going to be simulating for these different parameters. That's the background, that's the context before we go into the technical discussion of the presentation. I would like to pause here before we start going into the analysis discussion. Let's see if we have any questions or comments.
I'm not seeing any hands raised or any questions in the comments at this time.
Okay, then I will pass it to Jenny Araj.
Thanks, Guillermo. Next slide. So I'm going to go into the key inputs for the benchmark setup for our case that's going to be used for analysis today. So first, let's look at the California ISO. We have the bid stack reflected here, and the top left is the physical generation in the California control area. So this includes all hydrothermal, renewable batteries. We see there is, the gray amount that's self-scheduled. And then we have a pretty good offering from our negative $150 bid floor up to that kind of light red is $100. This is comparable to what we see in production in terms of offers. And then we have some additional supply all the way up to our bid cap of $1,000. Moving to the one that's at the top right, California ISO is the only entity that's allowed convergence bidding. So we have our virtual supply and demand megawatts summarized here. Again, an offering from our bid floor, negative 150 all the way up to 1,000 in terms of the virtual megawatts. And finally, the bottom right there is our demand. Mostly self-scheduled. That large orange part is the self-schedule. And then you can see we have some price-responsive demand willing to pay up to $1,000. Next slide.
It looks like we do have a question from Alan that came in right as we started this slide. So if we could take maybe Alan's question real quick before we move to the next slide.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Alan Meck, PG&E. I'm wondering about the supply stack that you have in the very first graph on the left there, because the supply of imbalanced reserves is restricted to what resources can offer within a 30-minute ramp period. And given that I'm seeing at max, it looks like I'm going to eyeball this and say 75,000 megawatts worth of supply in your bid stack. I'm guessing that not all of that supply is capable of meeting that 30-minute ramp period. And so I'm wondering if you are using the proper restrictions, and because it's going to be a lot fewer resources that are able to offer X amount of supply within a 30-minute ramp period for imbalanced reserve.
Yeah, this is the energy offers, not necessarily the imbalanced reserve capacity. So this is just hourly energy megawatts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. Okay, so we have our two EDAM entities. We call Pacific Core East, PACE, P-A-C-E, and Pacific Core West, PAC West, P-A-C-W. On the top, we have PACE's supply bid stack, their physical generation. They have some self-schedule, and then the majority of megawatts up to, from negative 150 up to about $50 is most of their offer. Over to the right is their demand. a great deal is self-scheduled, and then they have price responsive demand up to $50. Down at the bottom left is the physical megawatts for Pac West. Again, self-schedule is represented at the bottom with some offers between -150 and basically $50 going all the way up to $100. And then their demand, again, self-scheduled, and then price responsive demand up to $50. Next slide. A key input, ancillary services for the California ISO. So EDM is only going to optimize AS for the California balancing area. The other two areas will have their AS self-scheduled. So with the co-optimization of AS and energy, this is a key input, and we're reflecting typical day levels here, both the reg up and reg down, and then our operating reserve spin and non-spin using this profile here. Next slide. Okay, let's talk about some of the new products for EDAM. A key new product is imbalanced reserves. So each balancing authority will have its own imbalanced reserve requirement target. But now that we have a large footprint across multiple states, there's a wide range of resources available that can be leveraged to improve reliability. And so we call that diversity, and there's a diversity benefit reduction for all EDM entities. You can see the gray lines show the raw imbalanced reserve requirements that can go, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 megawatts. But because there is a diversity benefit reduction, you can see the requirements are much lower, and this shows the first one to the right is California ISO imbalanced reserve up. The average hourly reduction for diversity is 456 megawatts, with the max diversity benefit being 1,064 in 1 hour. And same for the down. We see an average diversity benefit reduction of 263 megawatts per hour, with a max of 812 for 1 hour. Next slide.
Before we continue, we do have a couple questions.
Okay.
First, we have a question from Vijay Singh. Go ahead, Vijay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Can you just back up a few slides to the slide showing the amount of self-scheduled demand versus bid-in demand?
Mm-hmm.
Just a general question here, I guess, about the supply stack as well. Can you explain how you came up with the supply stacks for supply and demand here?
Yeah, BJ, this is not perfect science. What we have used is some historical bits that are available from PAC. There are other bits that have been made up. They are seeded into the environment. And I believe at some point, any participant, including PAC, may bid into the market. So if somebody bids into the market simulation environment, that bid may replace the seeded bid. So there are some caveats for that information. And that is one of the challenges of trying to build a scenario where we can rely on a specific set of supply. That is what we have so far. Now I have to say that we have been able to clean up this scenario as much as we could. We are going to be in a better place to adjust these bits to make it more realistic based on the profile that we see for the entity in the real time. One of the challenges that we see here, for instance, is that in some cases you can see that the profile of the bit is kind of flat. We would expect to see, for instance, some shaping following the track of the load pattern, and that is not reflected in this type of profile scenario. I think for the subsequent rounds, we can do better tuning to get a more realistic shaping of the profile of the supplies and the demand.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Yeah, I was just looking at the, especially the Pac West demand being completely flat, and I was kind of surprised and confused by that. But that makes sense. Thanks, Guillermo.
You're welcome.
Next, we have a question. Oh, go ahead, Isabella.
Yeah, we have 3 more questions in queue, so maybe we can take these and then try to hold some other questions till we get a little bit further in the presentation, just so we can manage the time. I know we have quite a bit of material to get through. So Steve, go ahead.
Can you, on this slide, can you explain why on the imbalance reserve up at 7 o'clock, there's basically nothing? And then at 8 o'clock, there's like the biggest number there. And then also on the imbalance reserve down, what's going on in hour 19 where it's 0?
Sure, I can take on that, Steve. And this is another area where we want to further curate the data. I can tell you we try to make as clean as possible the data that is available in market simulation using the inputs data. And what typically happens when we are estimating the requirements for imbalance reserves, that is kind of the same for flexible ramping product, is that you go through the collection of the historical data, you build the polynomials, you obtain the coefficients of the polynomials, and you do the regression. Through that math, there would be cases where the resulting value could be out of band. So we have set, not only in imbalance reserves, but also for flexible ramping products, this tolerance band, how high, how low the requirements can go. And in those cases, for our ending 7 for up and our ending 19 for down, it happens that the results of the regression give you basically negative values. So it's bounded to be 0, non-negative. That's the reason it goes back to 0. And you can see that on OASIS. It happens not only for the imbalance reserves, it can happen also for flexible ramping products for the real time. For the next rounds, I have to say, now we have a better collection of historical requirements. We're going to use a more moderate profile, taking some type of averages over a period of time to avoid these one-day kind of outliers.
Okay. One thing I think that would be helpful to me is if you could put out some information about, I know it's been put out, but just kind of how you're calculating the amounts, the requirements for balance reserve up and down, and then the values you're getting using historical data, so that we, I was trying before to figure out like what the values were and how those were being estimated, and I was having a hard time trying to figure that out. If you could, provide some information on how you're maybe not necessarily just coming out of the market sim or whatever, but looking at historical values, what you expect those values to be. I mean, and part of that is looking at the numbers you have here. I'm a little concerned when I see that the imbalance reserve up in hour 18 is 4,000, and in that same hour the imbalance reserve down is 5,000. That implies that there's a potential movement within that hour of, what does that add up to, like 9,000 megawatts?
Sorry, I don't follow that math, but let me tell you this.
Well, what I'm doing is just adding the two together. I mean, part of what the imbalance reserves are supposed to do is when you do the day ahead, right, you're setting an hourly number for that hour. And then, part of that variation around it, some of it is just variation, but some of it is also the fact that since this is in the afternoon and things are ramping up, that for the first half of the hour, you're going to have to go down. You're going to have imbalance down come in, and then for the second half, you're going to have it come up. So I'm just, that's implying a 9,000 megawatt shift over that hour.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the feedback. So let me give you a good answer for this. We know that the imbalance reserve requirements is a new feature that is going to be critical to the market. Indeed, it is so important to us that prior to having this working group session, there was a dedicated effort to explore the calculation and the setup of the imbalance reserve requirements, not only for the CAISO area, but also for the other future EDAM entities. That information was discussed in at least 2 working groups, one in October, November, another one in February 2025. The information is publicly posted. We recently posted actually more granular information about the requirements for imbalance reserves based on historical calculations. We can send you that link. That information is publicly available. If you missed the discussions back in October, November, and February, you can refer to all that information that is posted on the website. In there, you will find all the profiles of the imbalance reserve requirements based on historical information, and that will give you a good reference on what to check.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, can we move to the next one? Operator, can we open up the line for Jordan?
Hi, Guillermo. This is Jordan Miner from the CPC. I have a question about slide 19 also. If we could go back. Oh, I mean 18. Thank you. Do we have prices associated with all these imbalance reserves for every hour? And is that data possible to get?
We have what we call demand curves. There are 2 pieces of information. One is the requirement, that is a megawatt quantity for up and down, and they are posted on OASIS for market simulation or in the dedicated effort that we have for historical information. As a companion, there is also the demand curves that are utilized in the market application to determine the optimal level of clearing imbalance reserves. Yes, they are price sensitive. They go all the way up to $55. That happens to be one of the parameters that is in the scope of this effort for assessment. Whether we post the demand curve is something I can check with our IT team. I need to confirm if we post the demand curve.
Okay, thank you. We'll keep an eye out for that.
Okay, can we take Dan Williams' question?
Yeah.
Guillermo, Dan Williams from the Energy Authority. Just another quick foundational question. On the diversity benefit, are those results assuming a certain transfer capacity between CAISO and PAC West and PAC West and PAC East? And if so, what was the assumption there?
I don't think transfers. I think it's a statistical analysis of each area's demand and then their balance of solar and wind.
Yeah, and then just more specific to your question, I think you are coming with how we derive the diversity factor. We have imbalance reserve estimated for each individual balancing area. Then we also estimate the imbalance reserve requirements for the whole market footprint. Then you get a summation of the individual area requirements against the imbalance requirements for the market footprint. That ratio is effectively the diversity. If that ratio gives you 80%, that means we're going to scale down 80% the applicable requirements of each individual area. And
that's what I was expecting.
Yeah, and sorry, as far as I recall, there is no consideration of the transfer capability.
Okay, that was the source of the question. Is I was remembering it as the transfer capability set a bounds on the amount of diversity credit that could be awarded, and since there's limited transfer capability just in the May 1st go live, I was surprised to see larger diversity benefit reductions, for the CAISO BA. And but I'll go back and reread some of this stuff though, and thanks for posting that link in the chat just to refresh, and we can follow up at a future call.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, looks like we have 2 more hands, and then we'll continue with the slides. So, Chenyu?
I recall you say that this data actually it's from MarketSim, right? It's the analysis based on MarketSim's data. Is that correct statement?
It's largely, well, we built a study case from a case originated in market simulation, and we have to do some adjustments to ensure that we have reasonable information. That said, there are more adjustments we can do to make it even better, and that will be something we are going to be doing in the next round.
Right. So the data you present here, this is just an average from September 2nd to sometime in October. I just try to understand, this is specific trade day or it's an average of a period of time? And if it's a period of,
Yeah, good point. No, this is not an average because the first days, actually the first 2-3 weeks of market simulation, the conditions of the data were not that great. So we have to tune that in market simulations to reach the point of being more comfortable. So we are using specifically one trade day that is in early October.
Okay, so this is a one trade day in early October.
Yes.
I see. Okay, but did you also look at several trade days to determine, I mean, how you determine that specific trade day is better than the other trade day?
As soon as we could find some reasonable day, we stopped looking for, and we have to move into doing the analysis. That is one of the complexities, right? And I have to be upfront here. You may recall the early discussions of a year ago that we were hesitant to start this analysis as early as market simulation precisely because of all these challenging issues of the data quality. And I can tell you, for all this effort that we have been doing for this first round, we have spent 90% of our time trying to ensure that we can get a reasonable setup. I feel confident that for the subsequent sessions, we are going to reuse this type of scenario that is kind of clean up. We can continue to improve the solution, but this is as much as we can do.
I see. So for the subsequent analysis, I don't know if you have determined or you have to be based on the data condition. You're looking for a period of time, or you still going to just pick one trade day looks maybe reasonable to you and the team, and that is a trade day you're going to pick? Because I'm just a little worried if it's just based on one trade day, and it might not able to tell the whole story, right?
Well, it depends what story you are looking for to say, right? And this is another expectation that we have to create clearly for this effort. This is not an effort to project binding production solutions that are going to happen on May 1st. This is not the scope. This is not the intent. The intent here is to start basic by understanding the interplays, the market solutions, and we feel confident that the scenario that we have achieves that point. We are not at the place where we have every single data point with the quality that we need to buy in, to say that this is reflective of what is going to happen in production.
I understand. So understand this is just like you keep refining it, but eventually the solution, or whatever the most refined parameter, that will be the initial set that will be deployed into production.
Yes, and as I indicated in the first efforts of this working group, that is going to be doing the parallel operations when we have the best quality possible, where we can rely on many different trading days, which is not a condition we can afford in market simulation.
I see. Okay, and then also we'll appreciate it next time if you also have this and maybe kind of put the trade day there, and we can actually reflect. We can go back to the trade day to see what we bid in, how this. So basically, we want to make sure that the conclusion or that draw from this study, and also it's synchronized what we see on our side as well. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Okay, let's take one last hand from Jonathan Rumble before we move on.
Hello?
Hello. Hi, we can hear you.
Hi, this is John Rummel from Southern California Edison. So Guillermo, the imbalance reserve demand curves are on Oasis in Market Sim, the map stage. Is there somewhere that explains what exactly it is we're looking at? Because it seems to be sort of the anti-demand curve at the lowest prices, the megawatts is the smallest. Is that supposed to represent the amount subtracted from the requirement?
Okay.
Yeah, the demand curves are a step demand curve with the max price set to $55. It's just, and yeah, they are published before the day ahead starts at 10 a.m. They represent a trade-off between the cost of procuring imbalanced reserve versus leaving that requirement unfulfilled. The business requirements for it are in the DAME business requirements.
Okay, maybe I
Yeah.
probably didn't see that one. Okay, yeah, because it's sort of, you know, the megawatts are increasing as the price is increasing, which is on what's shown on the page, and so that
we have a few examples in this presentation, so that'll help make it clear. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Let's move, Isabella. I think we can catch up with more questions at the end of this section because we have a lot of material to go through, and we are just in the setup of the inputs.
Yeah, so this is PAC East, same kind of trend as we just showed for California ISO. It's the gray raw requirements, and then what's really going to go into the procurement is the adjusted after we account for some diversity benefits. So you can see reductions for both services all along the hours. We can go to the next slide. PAC West also shows the same benefit here, the diversity benefit and the reduction across all hours. Next slide. Okay, I think we can go into the next slide, which we're going to talk about the actual market results from using these inputs for our benchmark case. Next slide. So here's the energy clearing for California ISO. This represents a 34,000 megawatt peak day, peaking there at hour ending 1819. We show the typical resource mix that we see here in California. We have our thermal, hydro, and imports making up the base of supply. We have our profile. California has quite a bit of batteries discharging during the morning and evening peaks with the charging in the midday hours. Then we have the high solar VER all throughout the midday with the ramp off at an hour ending 18. And we also see the energy pricing reflecting, you know, a morning peak there, and then low midday prices when the solar is at its max, and then an evening peak. We show the batteries charging during those midday hours when the prices are lowest. Next slide. Let's look at PAC East. So PAC East has more, their base is made up of thermal imports and some VER, and then the energy pricing is relatively flat throughout the day. The prices are moderate and under $20. This is in part due to the co-optimization of imbalance reserves and energy. We can get into that. There are some high imbalance energy prices for PAC East that compensates the low energy clearing here. Next slide. PAC West, again, has imports, thermal, and hydro with some VER. Again, their energy pricing, sorry that yeah, we can't see the dollar amount there, but I think it's under $20 again. We have some VER marginal in early morning hours, and then the rest of the marginal resources include MSG and steam turbines. They were all kind of priced similarly. That's why you see kind of a flat pricing there. Next slide. Okay, again, ISO has the AS clearing, and we see, again, similar to production, mostly battery is clearing for regulation up and regulation down. Batteries, the gray there, with some hydro and thermal. Next slide. And then our operator and reserves, we have cleared spin and non-spin. Here we bring in some other type of resources, thermal and hydro, along with the battery fleet there. Next slide. So Guillermo mentioned this, our envelope constraint multipliers for our storage is set to the default value of 85% for the benchmark case. And you can see the energy pattern here a little bit better with some, a little bit of morning peak discharge, some midday charging, so that we can get up to peak SOC values, and then we discharge it during the evening peak. Next slide. Okay, let's bring in a new item for EDAM. We have what are called transfer system resources, and this illustrates how we will have price separation among the EDAM entities. So those of you that are familiar with our current market and our Western Imbalanced Energy Market know that we have one system marginal energy cost. We call that the SMEC, and that the price separation in our WIN is shown through the congestion component. EDAM is a different paradigm here. We have what's called a marginal energy cost for each BA. So lambda here is the shadow price of the energy balance for each balancing authority. You can see that the California ISO's marginal energy cost is $54 for this hour ending 18 in our benchmark, reflecting the economic clearing in California. Then PacWest's marginal energy clearing is $20.37, reflecting the clearing there, and then PACE is $12, reflecting the bids that cleared in PACE in hour ending 18. We also have ROW, which is the shadow price of imbalance, the imbalance reserve up constraint for each balancing area. So each balancing area, like I said, has its own requirement and is going to have its own imbalance reserve price for each service. California's in hour ending 18 is set to $32.27. PacWest is at $11.51, and then PACE is at $11.33. Next slide. Okay, let's go into an example in hour ending 18 where there is an optimized transfer going from PacWest through the Malin 500 intertie down to California ISO. And so what cleared here is, so we have different types of transfer system resources, TSRs. Type 4 is the type that is optimized by the market. Once we see that we have leftover capacity on our ties, the EDAM will optimize, and in this case, it optimized that it is beneficial to send 23 megawatts of imbalance reserve up from PacWest down through that Malin tie to California ISO. So PacWest is going to send 23 megawatts of imbalance reserve up, and that's going to meet California ISO's imbalance up reserve requirement. And then we don't have any other TSRs. They're all at a zero limit here, so this was the only one combined. Next slide, on Malin at least. The next one, so we also have what's called the crag view intertie. So here we show a couple of transfers going from PacWest. So PacWest and ISO have what's called a Type 1 TSR. That is a bilateral transaction. So this is like a self-scheduled import between the two EDAMs. They can use these Type 1 TSRs and just put it on a TSR instead of self-scheduling an import. So that is 38 megawatts of energy coming down from PacWest through the crag intertie into California. Additionally, the EDAM optimized on a Type 4 TSR. It had a 23 megawatt limit. It optimized that it was beneficial to send that low-priced energy from PacWest down to California ISO, and it bound at that 23 megawatt energy limit. So the benchmark case has, you know, these small amounts of imports or TSRs occurring, and we wanted to show that. Next slide. Okay, let's get into imbalanced reserve. So imbalanced reserve, it can be set by this demand curve that we will publish before the day ahead starts for every service, for every hour, for each EDAM entity. And so the ISO has, so we use, it says cleared, and that's a capital I and a little u. I know it looks like lowercase lu, but that's how we're denoting imbalance up in some of these trends. And so you can see that at times that it's actually a dark gray color, that's called demand curve. We can't meet the requirement in those hours. Or actually, it's too expensive. There might be too many resources offering imbalance reserve up for $55. And when we look at our demand curve, we can just take the, what we call the infeasibility for imbalance reserve at $20 or $30. And so the optimization will do that in hours where it sees it's beneficial to just take the demand curve megawatts instead of procuring very high price imbalance reserve up. Next slide. So imbalance reserve, so this is imbalance reserve down. For ISO, we had plenty of imbalance reserve down that could clear here. It was mainly the prices were set by low-priced renewables and hydros offering, you know, imbalance reserve down sometimes under $1. And so you can see we were able to clear the imbalance reserve down quite frequently here in CAISO in the benchmark case. Go to the next slide. Okay, PACE, imbalance reserve, again, they were able to meet it mainly with thermal and burst supply. There tended to be an offer a little over $10 there, I think it was $12, that was set by those resources in most hours. The requirement drops in hourning 11 to 13, so we're able to access some lower priced RU bids during that time. Next slide. So the imbalance reserve down here, it's mostly demand curve. The requirement is quite high and was unable to be met. So we do see it hitting that demand curve quite often and some high prices there in the $40 range, 40 down to $20 range for PAC East. Next slide. They were able to clear imbalance reserve up, this is imbalance reserve up for PacWest. Okay, PacWest had a lot of hydro. That's the blue there, offering some recently priced imbalance reserve up. So we see that clearing in that $10 range there. Let's go to the next slide. And then PacWest for imbalance reserve down. Again, hitting that demand curve, there wasn't, you know, their clearing process used that demand curve when it sees prices at $20 and $30 rather than maybe going for those $55 physical resource bids. Okay, I think I'll open it. I did go over a lot of stuff, and I see some questions racking up. So let's go to some questions, Isabella.
Great. Can we go to Jordan Miner?
Hello, this is Jordan Miner from the Energy Division. Thanks for taking my questions. I have a couple questions. First, I want to start on slide 24.
Okay. Would you go back to 20? Thank you.
What's it, 23? It's 23, 24.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's, okay, 23. So is Kaiser going to model a high load and low load day? I guess because in this scenario, we only have a 34 gigawatt peak.
Yeah, I would say please be patient with us. We are starting the effort. There will be a time in the effort where we are going to go into more stress cases scenarios. And yes, when we reach that stage, we are going to be looking into tighter days. As of now, as I indicated, this is the introductory, exploratory phase, and we cannot cover everything, but it's due to come later on.
Okay, that's understandable. And then could you please clarify what trading day this is that we're looking at? Because I think you mentioned early October earlier, but you didn't mention a specific day.
Yeah, I think it's October 4th.
Okay, thank you. And then I also have a question on slide 30.
Okay.
So I've seen some price differentials between the Northwest and CAISO. Is that and the price difference between Northwest and California, is this a result of imbalanced reserves or is this normal congestion that we're seeing here?
We're not seeing congestion. We're seeing the different energy clearing in each balancing authority and a transfer of imbalanced reserves.
Okay, so can you clarify that? So we've seen a transfer of imbalanced reserves, not congestion.
I mean, I think they're all. Yeah, so this is the only one with the limit available. So we don't have very much TSR capacity available in the benchmark case.
And are we concerned at all with market power with having very limited TSI capacity?
I think market power is still done at the local level in these cases. We only have market power mitigation on flow gates and nomograms.
Sorry, could you rephrase your question? We couldn't grasp what the question was.
Well, because you had mentioned that this is because there isn't a lot of TSI available. So I was concerned, is this because of market power occurring?
Oh, no, this is just the setup, right? And if you look at the values of the transfers that are made available, we're talking about a few megawatts here, 23 megawatts for the limit. That is not really a plentiful amount of transfer capability. It's more of the setup of the scenario that we have.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Those are all my questions.
Callie? Okay, thanks, Jordan. Yeah, can we unmute Callie's line?
Yeah, I actually had questions on this slide and then I think slide 31 as well. So my first, I just want to make sure I understand the differences between slide 30 and 31. So this one you're showing 23 megawatt limit and it's transferring imbalance reserves from PacWest to CAISO. This is hour ending 18. On the next slide, it looks like you have more transfers that are binding.
Yeah, sorry, it's a different intertie, yeah. So the first one was only Malin and the capacity available on Malin, and now the slide 31 is this Cragview intertie, which is also a tie between PacWest and ISO.
Okay, but in the actual market in this hour, all of those this is all simultaneously, they were all binding.
Mm-hmm.
You just separate them in two slides. Okay, that helps, thanks. So I guess my other question is on the pricing here. So obviously there are different prices for energy and imbalance reserves between the three BAAs, and we have the binding transfer limits, which means that there's a shadow price on those transfer limits that's causing the price separation. I was wondering if maybe in the next iteration of this, or maybe you guys know off the top of your head, what the shadow prices were of each of these binding transfers, and then how they translated into each of the BA's energy prices and imbalance reserves. I'm just trying to figure out which transfers are causing the price separation for which products.
Yeah, we can next time.
Yeah, we can address that next time.
Okay, but it is the binding transfer limits, the CRADView and the Malin between PacWest and CAISO that's causing the price separation in energy between the three, as well as the imbalance reserves price separation?
No, each area is being cleared on its own with its own energy bid.
Yeah, we'll provide it.
Okay, yeah, because I thought that the MECs were basically which are your separate energy prices here, were essentially the system marginal energy cost component we know today, which is the same in all of them, plus the shadow prices of any binding transfer constraints between them. So I was just trying to kind of map that out here. But yeah, if you guys can provide that in the next, maybe the next meeting, or even if you could update these slides, that would be great. Thanks. Just trying to understand how the pricing is working out here.
Yeah, it's a new paradigm, so we will provide more information on that in the next iteration.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all I have for now.
Okay, thanks for the feedback, Kelly. Dan Williams?
Thanks. I'll just offer a quick kind of high-level request or observation. Just I know we're getting short on time. The work that's gone into this has obviously been massive, but the impact of these choices are also massive, and I think we're also seeing just a very large interest in understanding the market functionality better. Would it be possible for the ISO to open a written comment period, at least following this meeting, so that we can submit questions for the next workshop, but importantly, be able to see the questions that other entities have going into that workshop? Yeah, I have found a lot of value in PacifiCorp's customer comment matrix that they've been doing for their EDAM implementation stakeholder process, and would love to see something kind of similar here that would allow us to set up a little bit better for the next round of this, and hopefully let you get through some more of your content today.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So we are planning on opening a comment period. So following this working group, it'll be open for 2 weeks, which will give us an additional 2 weeks to kind of review and prepare for the working group in November. So comments following this working group will be due in early November on the 4th. We'll have more information on that in a slide at the end of the presentation. Okay. All right. The call-in user 6, we can unmute them.
Hey, this is Michelle Keto from the CPUC Energy Division. Just a couple of follow-up questions. So I think one question is, given that we're hitting the demand curve in a low load period, that essentially means that the resources are probably all bidding 55. Aren't we concerned about market power? Market power is the ability to influence prices. I mean, this is a low load period. This isn't even a high load period.
Yeah, well, let me answer your question in 2 parts, Michelle. The first part is, what bids are setting the price? Well, it depends on what setup we have. I cannot say that the bids that we are using for imbalance reserves are all submitted by participants. Many of the bids are planted bids that we created for the market simulation because we have to have some type of bids. So the bids that currently have at this stage of the process of the implementation effort are not reflective of the actual bids that eventually could be in there. So we have to be clear about that expectation. And the second part, yes, that's the reason there is a bid cap of $55, and that's the reason there is a default bid price of $55 that is part of the analysis that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, but $55, if you clear at $20 and you have 2,000 megawatts per hour, you guys can do the math, and we're in hundreds of millions of dollars. So, that seems like something we should be concerned about. 55 doesn't seem sufficient to protect about that. I mean, the benefits of EDAM are like, $100 million and we potentially lose that much in EDAM. It just seems like we should be concerned about market power. But okay, then my second question is with regard to the energy prices that you guys showed, do you have a counterfactual to say what would have happened if we weren't co-optimizing imbalance reserves? Because it's sort of like compared to what?
No, we have our new EDAM software. We now have imbalance reserves integrated with the new market.
Well, except that in the later slides, you say it didn't really affect energy prices. So that feels like you are able to say that. So I guess I'm confused about the two different things.
Well, maybe you wait for the rest of the presentation, Michelle. We can come back to that point because we touched on that.
Okay. Well, and with regard to that, because I don't want to bother you because I'm traveling and it's too loud, I just noted it would be super great if we could get those energy prices, because if they persist, they may not look like much, but it's hard to discern what they actually are. Is there any way we could actually get the data behind those energy prices that you have? You also have some different IR prices given different caps, and it would be really great if we could get that data as well as opposed to a chart. So I just, that's an ask, and we'll certainly include it in our comments, but it would be great if we could have it before then. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, Ellen?
We cannot hear you, Ellen.
Hi. Can you hear me now, Guillermo?
Very softly.
Is that any better?
Oh, much better. Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks. It's Ellen Wolf from Zero Consulting, and I think I have similar question to those asked by Jordan and Callie about the binding TSRs. I think, Guillermo, you characterized it as not being congestion. But again, just trying to understand, if the TSRs weren't binding, then would the imbalance reserve and energy prices all be equal between the adjacent areas?
Yeah, we'll provide more information in the next meeting about the TSR congestion and price separation. So you will have more information.
Yeah, but
they were binding at a limit. It's at a certain point. It doesn't impact California as a whole, and PacWest as a whole is what we'll try to illustrate in the next time.
Yeah, but conceptually, Ellen, I think you are right that we have this. Well, let me step back. If you look at the framework that we have for the real time, we have a SMEC, and then when we have congestion on the transfer, that creates price separation between balancing areas, right? And you can construct the prices as the combination of the SMEC and the corresponding shadow prices of the transfers. Now in the EDAM construct, the framework is slightly different. It doesn't change the physics of the flows. What effectively happens is that you're going to have a SMEC for each balancing area, and that MEC somehow has embedded the effect of the transfers. And I believe we should be able to see also the shadow prices behind those transfers, but at the end, it's going to be embedded or is part of the MEC. That is the only variation that we have now in the framework with the EDAM. To Hai-Feng's point, I think we can do a better job to bring all the pieces together so you can see the association of the MEC and the transfers and how the price separation happens. So we will improve the display in the next round.
Okay, that'd be fantastic. And will that information be available when the market's live for somebody to be able to do that disaggregation?
We for sure have the MECs. I have to confirm if we're posting publicly the individual shadow prices.
Okay.
So the change, yeah, so there are going to be changes, right? In the current, by the way, this is handle market validation EDI. So currently in EIM, the ETSRs in EIM, they impact the marginal cost of congestion. And that price, shadow price, is posted on OASIS because it's a part of the marginal cost of congestion component. But in future EDAM, that TSR price is no longer impact the marginal cost of congestion component. So it will be embedded in the marginal energy cost, as Guillermo just mentioned. I know this is new and may be confusing, so in the next round, we are going to provide more information, so to give you a better idea.
Okay, well, this has been very helpful, just this little discussion, so thank you. Appreciate it.
Ellen. Okay, I have one more question from Kathleen, and then we'll continue with the slides.
Thanks. This is Kathleen Colbert from Vistra. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Kathleen, we can.
Excellent. Thanks, Guillermo, Jenny, and hi, Fang. Really appreciate it all. I feel like you're going to punt this to that next conversation, but I did want to just tag on my question so that you could think about it, and that would be excellent. So that would be incredibly helpful to have that. I raised my hand a while back. Similar question to, I think, how Callie framed it. I think I know what the formula is, but it's different than the formula that I see on slide 30. And so I did think the formula was the lambda for the PBC plus the sum of the shift factor for, let's say, the CAISO BAA relative to the transfer constraints, shadow prices, all summed to get to the MEC. But then this looks like it's, generation within the BAA compared to the load nodes within the BAA on slide 30. And so I appreciate you doing that extra conversation and spending some time on the formula so we can make sure we understand which constraints are being modeled, because they would have different impacts. But like Haifeng, your answer sounds like my first understanding was still correct. It's just a matter of how the sum of those shadow prices are being calculated within the MEC instead of within the marginal cost of congestion. Punt that for the extra explanations. That's totally fine. What I had been confused about, assuming my first understanding was correct, is I know how a normal node's shift factor is calculated from a power flow perspective, but I've heard bandied around that transfers don't have that. They have a binary shift factor, and I don't understand how that works within this new paradigm.
Binary, you mean 100%?
Yeah.
And the negative 100%?
I heard it's 0 or 1. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's, in general, we have two types of constraints, right? For the transfers, they belong to, we call it a scheduling constraints. And then we have physical constraints like transmission lines, transformers. So for the scheduling constraints, yes, it's binary. It's either you are constrained by that scheduling limit, then you have 100%, or you are not constrained, right? You are in a different scheduling point, then you have 0%. So that's where the binary come from. But for transmission lines, transformers, they can vary all the way from 0 to 100. 1%, 2%, 99%. Is that your question?
Yeah, exactly. So like if you're looking at this slide 30, what I had wanted to ask you is, am I understanding correctly that the different TSR limits are scheduling limits, where I should understand everything inside the CISO is a 1 and everything in PAC-West is a 0?
Yes, it's a scheduling limit, yes, and it impacts the whole area. You're correct.
Okay, great. And I look forward to those other examples. That was confusing me. So appreciate you guys including that for the future discussion. Thank you.
Sure. And thank you, Catalina. And bear with us. I think we are going through this new functionality, and we all are learning along the way. And that's the reason we find this useful to start from the basics. So we will try to do a better job in illustrating the concepts here.
Okay. Next slide, Isabella. So for my final slides, I'm going to provide some color on how we are setting these imbalance reserve prices. The first example here is maybe what we call the happy path, when we use economic bids to clear the whole requirement. So, you know, in Ironing 8, PacWest has an imbalance down reserve requirement that's entirely cleared by economic bids. We have resource A offering $5, and we go through the supply stack till we get to the last megawatt that satisfies the requirement at resource F. They bid $25.66. So that is the clearing price for all resources for imbalance reserve down for PacWest for this hour. Next slide. So we've talked about when the imbalance reserve requirement is not procured fully, we're going to go to these imbalance reserve demand curves. So in Ironing 8 in the benchmark case, the ISO has this requirement of 2940.44. From our internal resources, we can get 2425. We can also get a transfer on those TSRs from our neighbors of 23 megawatts, but still we're left with an imbalance reserve shortage of 492 megawatts. And so if you go to your demand curves, which should be published on OASIS, we'll have to follow up with some of that publishing, you can see that it is between the points 2 and 3 there, so between 360.65 and 773. And the way we read that is that we would go to the segment 2 price of $30.44. So that will be the imbalance reserve price for CAISO for this hour for all resources due to the shortage. Next slide. We also have cases where the clearing process is right at that breaking point on the demand curve. So in our benchmark case in Ironing 16, the ISO short is at 547.13, which just happens to be right there at that segment 1 and 2 breaking point of 547.13. So in these cases, the imbalance reserve price can be anywhere between $17 and $28.49. We set the price for Ironing 16 to $24.25. Next slide. And then finally, want to remind everybody that we do have what we call the deployment scenario for imbalance reserve. Similar to what we implemented for FlexRamp a couple of years ago, we test for the deliverability of imbalance reserves and assume that the energy and the imbalance reserve is going to be fully deployed. And so we have an example here where resource A has a pretty cheap 10-cent imbalance reserve bid, but it's in the congested area. And that full deployment scenario results in negative $23.73 in an IRU MCC, congestion component. So to form the price for the IRU LMP, we set the IRU marginal energy cost to $23.83. So $23.83 plus that negative $23.73 will result in that 10-cent IRU LMP for resource A that's in that congested area, and we'll clear that 32 megawatts. The rest of the resources aren't in a congested area and will just be exposed to the IRU MCE of $23.83, and we'll pay all those resources that price. This scenario is less expensive than relaxing the imbalance reserve procurement and using the demand curve because the first segment of the demand curve was $32. So you can see it's better to get the congested IRU than to go to the demand curve in some scenarios. So I've finished up my slides. I see there's another question, Isabel.
Can we unmute Robert Fisher?
Hi, this is Robert Fisher with NV Energy, and I'll try to be brief about this. Jenny, can you remind me in regards to the breakpoints on the demand curves, are those based upon statistical points? And can the bid curves increase or decrease in size as in, or sorry, number of steps?
Yeah, I see a variety of steps in the hours. I'm not quite sure how, what, but it is a statistical analysis using the latest load forecast. So we do it right before the 10 a.m. closing to determine those different steps.
So back on slide 38, I think it was 38. Sorry, 39 or 40. You have 6 steps, and it landed on step 2. Is that related to a statistical point? So 6 is obviously your P97.5, and then you got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Are those different statistical points?
Yeah, I'll have to talk to the.
That's from the bulk application.
Yeah.
We can get more information for you, Robert.
Yeah, I'd be very curious because this is quite fascinating. You have 4,000 megawatts of a requirement, and you settled around 360 megawatts. And so I'm kind of fine with the statistical aspect of it because we're not always going to need 97.5%. Some days may need, very small amounts. But how these bid curves are determined at the megawatt level is going to kind of be an important aspect for bidding. So if you could expand upon that, and I can maybe do some research as well.
Yeah, and I think, Robert, there is explanation of the calculation that we have in the VRS for the DIM, but we can bring more illustration in the next time to make it more intuitive.
It would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. We have another hand from Carrie Bentley.
Our trading forum. On that last slide, maybe I heard you wrong, but it sounded like you said that the resource can't be deployed for IR, but that it was still awarded on slide 38. Can you clarify?
No, it is deployed, and that results in the congestion. Yeah, the last slide, and one more slide, a couple more slides. So. Sorry. No, can you go?
Go forward.
Forward.
Like slide 40 or something?
Yeah, another one.
Oh yeah, apologies. I didn't mean the slide before the current one. I meant the one we just.
Next slide, please. Yeah, this slide. Yeah, so the deployment of the 32 megawatts of IRU will result in congestion in that area, and that's reflected in the price there.
Okay, so it is deliverable then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I must have misunderstood. And then another follow-up is the deployment congestion.
Well, you're cutting out on us.
Is the deployment congestion included in the energy price? And if so, can you add that data in the next iteration of this?
Yeah, I believe in that. Yeah, that local area, it would be. It's the same way we do for FlexRamp today.
That makes sense to me. Do you think you could add the data on that? Can you add the additional information you're going to in this presentation?
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. And Kathleen?
Great, thank you. Kathleen Colbert from Vistra. Similar sort of line of questioning, and I maybe didn't fully catch the answer. Not maybe, I didn't catch the answer you gave. Because when I was looking at this slide, Jenny, I was going, oh, are you really going to report out an IRU, MCE, MCL, and MCC on OASIS where we could see it like this? Could you clarify?
Yes, we'll report.
Okay, and that's interesting. I had thought IRU pricing would be a single price, an IRU, like marginal clearing price. But so what you're saying is you're going to report out multiple components for IRU.
Yeah, I think so. We will confirm that, but
sure. Yeah, no worries.
And the congestion, the flow gates and nomograms that bind.
Yeah.
IRU.
Oh, that's great. That's great news. I think that's fantastic. I'm actually very, relieved to hear that level of transparency. That's going to be very helpful. One of the questions I have had was where the congestion associated with the imbalance reserves is going to actually show up in the price formation. So I heard Carrie ask something along the lines of, and the way I heard it, apologize if I heard it wrong, was, is that marginal cost going to show up in the energy LMP? And I thought I heard you say yes. So I think I'm still a little confused over if this is like a separate component for IRU, for the IRU product, or if it's also getting captured in the energy MCC as well.
Yeah, we'll provide more information next time to explain how the deployment scenario of imbalance reserve can impact LMPs, the price, market clearing prices for both energy product and the imbalance reserve product.
That would be great and very appreciated. My second question was just on the idea of the imbalance reserve award causing congestion. I was curious if there's any logic being implemented that would bound that congestion to basically limit the IRU LMP to no lower than 0, or if it's going to allow it to become a negative LMP for IRU.
So just for price perspective, right?
Not meaning to be tricky, just curious.
Yes, if it's just for price, it can go negative because of congestion, right? Probably, more concerning, more interesting part is when a resource is awarded imbalance reserve, can the price be negative or not? So that's part of market simulation and our testing. We'll find out more.
When you say price, can the marginal cost of energy, the IRU MCE, be negative?
The whole price for the resource imbalance reserve, right? So
that's exactly,
Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering. Okay.
Yeah, but if a resource does not get any imbalance reserve award, it's possible that at that resource financial location, the imbalance reserve award price can be negative. But the resource does not get any imbalance reserve award, okay? That's a different scenario.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're trying to say, don't give it to me. Not to make a bad joke about pricing and it meaning something. That would be really helpful to kind of get it when you guys look into this and to seeing some of those results from the market sim. I want to make sure that we're understanding, because in the spirit of prices should mean things, that we're understanding when I see a negative price, what that means, and versus if I see a really high price. So I appreciate examples with the demand curve, but digging deeper into the negatives would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Okay, I think that brings us to our next section. So I know we have about 30 minutes left of the call today, and we have the 2 sensitivity analyses to go through. So I'll turn things over to Scott.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Isabella. So we've just gone through a lot of metrics on the base case, and now we're going to get into some of the analysis we did, starting with the envelope multiplier constraint. So we'll start off, these are new constraints, so we'll start off with some background on how these constraints work, and then we'll get into the details of what we saw when we started to manipulate some of the parameters within this constraint. So next slide, please. So some background on what we're talking about here with the envelope multiplier constraint. So as part of day-ahead market enhancements, we'll have 2 new state of charge constraints for batteries. We'll have the up envelope constraint and the down envelope constraint. The up envelope constraint tracks the impact of upward ancillary services on the state of charge, and the down envelope constraint tracks the impact of downward ancillary services. So I'm talking about upward ancillary services. We're talking about IRU, regulation up, spin, and non-spin. And then in the down direction, we just have IRD and regulation down. The envelope multiplier or the attenuation factor, we kind of use those terms interchangeably in the presentation, is a parameter within these constraints that defines how much state of charge is reserved from a battery when it's awarded imbalance reserve in the future intervals. So we also have constraints that make sure that in each interval, the battery has enough state of charge to provide the imbalance reserve. But what we're talking about here is how that state of charge changes from one interval to the next when the battery has an IR award. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the formulation for the up direction. So this is the equation for the SOC up envelope. If you're familiar with the current SOC AT equation, it should look pretty similar to you, but without the reg down term in it. So what we're really looking at here is the SOC from one interval to the next is going to equal the SOC plus any energy charging or discharging minus the impact of regulation and spin and non-spin. That's the top row of that equation. And then in the bottom half, we have the new term, which is the attenuation factor of the imbalance reserve or the envelope multiplier times the IRU. And we use an average of the current hour IRU and the next hour IRU because of the timing. These awards are for halfway through the hour, so that's why we have that average in there. Which just makes it a little bit more complicated, but overall, it's really just the attenuation factor times the IRU. These are all ancillary services that consume SOC when we provide them. So when I'm talking about regulation up or IRU, we're dispatching the battery positively. So we are subtracting from the state of charge. And so the SOCU needs to be greater than or equal to the state of charge minimum. Next slide, please. The down envelope equation looks at the regulation down and the IRD awards. And so the down equation has to be less than or equal to the state of charge maximum. So here we're looking in the up direction and making sure the battery has sufficient headroom to charge to be able to meet these regulation down and IRD awards. So similarly, we're looking at energy charging and discharging plus the reg down award times the reg down attenuation factor, factoring in charging efficiency. And then we have our new term here, which is our attenuation factor for IRD times the charging efficiency times the average IRD award in the current interval and one future interval. So that new IRD piece is the new part of the equation. And that AIRD and that AIRU, those are the two parameters that we're changing in this analysis. So those are what are telling us how much of the imbalance reserve product are we going to kind of subtract out from our SC availability going forward. Next slide, please. This is a resource example. It gets a little tricky here, so we won't go through the full example. But wanted to give you a sense of how these things look over time and how they would move for a sample resource. So this is a resource with a Pmax of 25, Pmin of negative 25, SOC max of 100 megawatt hours, and SOC min of 0 megawatt hours. So if we just start on the left here, in the first hour, we have the data shown in the table below. In the first hour, we have no energy, no IRU, and no IRD. we just have initial state of charge of 50 megawatt hours. In the second interval, we have a 10 megawatt IRU award. So by the end of the second interval, the SOCU is going to decrease by 8.5 megawatt hours, which is that ATIR, or the envelope multiplier, or the attenuation factor for IR, times that IRU piece. And after the two intervals have finished, it will have an impact of 8.5 megawatt hours on the SOCU. In the third interval, we have no energy nor IR awards. And then in the fourth interval, we have an IRD award of 20 megawatts. And so you'll see there's no impact to the SOC nor the SOCU. The only impact is to the SOCD. And it is a little bit less than 17 megawatts to impact or to account for that charging efficiency. So the chart on the left shows the energy IRU and IRD awards, and the chart on the right shows how these envelopes kind of stay and move through time. And so in this example, we hit the SOCU constraint. So the SOCU hits the SOC minimum of the battery in hour ending 11 and 12. So the battery won't be able to provide any more energy or ancillary services in the up direction until it has more charge in the battery. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like across our entire fleet. We have that SOCU and SOCD there, as well as the kind of just normal energy SOC. And at a high level, that SOCU is tracking the SOC impact of IRU and must remain above the SOC minimum. And then the SOCD tracks the SOC impact of IRD and must remain below the SOC maximum. Next slide, please. I think I'm just going to hold the questions till the end in the interest of time. So for our sensitivity analysis, we looked at 7 different values for the envelope multiplier. They were the same for the up and down direction in all cases, and they're shown here. So 10, 25, 40, 55, 70, 85, and 100. Our default value we used for the base case and that we are planning to use, at least to start off in production, is that 85% value. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into some results from what we saw when we changed these values. So on the left here, we have the 85% case, and on the right, we have the 10% case. So on the left, in that 85% case, we are reserving a lot more battery SOC when we award the battery's IRU. And as a result, we see significantly less battery clearing of the IRU commodity. On the right, we only have a 10% attenuation factor or envelope multiplier. And we see the batteries really dominate the imbalance reserve upmarket in that scenario where providing IRU or IRD doesn't have much impact on their state of charge. So when we increase that attenuation factor, we make it kind of harder for them, or they can't quite use as much of that SOC for other things when they're using it for IR. And so we see that in the total amount of cleared IRU clearly here between the 85% case and the 10% case. In the 85% case, we see battery IRU clearing decrease in almost every hour, and we see an increase in procurement from the demand curve, as well as from thermal resources and from hydro resources mainly. Next slide, please. So as you would expect, we see kind of similar trends when we look at the IRU awards for batteries and the CAISO IRU pricing. So here we didn't look at just 2 cases, but we looked at all 7. So these are how the battery IRU awards change through all of those 7 different attenuation factor cases and how the prices change. And what we see is that batteries are often setting the price for IRU. They have high ramp rates and they're always on, so they're well positioned to provide IRU, to provide a significant amount of it. And when we kind of ratchet down that attenuation factor, we see a lower amount of IRU coming from the batteries and therefore less supply and an increase in price. Next slide, please. So in the IRD market, we didn't see the batteries dominate quite so much. So again, here we're looking at the 85% case and the 10% case. There were 2 hours where we saw batteries play a larger role, which was hour ending 8 and hour ending 18. These are intervals we talked about earlier where we have higher IRD requirements. But even in the 85% attenuation factor case, we still see a fairly significant amount of IRD being procured from the batteries. So overall, we just see kind of not quite as much IRD being procured from the battery fleet as a whole. Next slide, please. These are the battery IRD awards and overall IRD CAISO pricing. So you can see in hour ending 18 and hour ending 8, we see a somewhat similar trend to the IRU awards and pricing, where with higher attenuation factors, see less battery IRD awards, which is what we would expect when we make it effectively more limiting to provide that SOC or to provide that IRU with their limited state of charge. And on the IRD pricing, when we see less supply, we see a higher price. Next slide, please. These 2 charts show the overall impact to the battery energy awards and to the CAISO energy price. There was a really moderate impact from changing these factors compared to the larger changes we saw in the IRU and even the IRD market and battery share of those markets. So the energy prices exceeded the IR prices, and they continued to drive the majority of the battery dispatch. The energy requirements are also obviously significantly higher than the IRU and IRD requirements. So overall, we didn't see major swings in battery energy dispatch, even when changing the attenuation factors. Next slide, please. Batteries provide a significant amount of the overall regulation. So we also wanted to look at the battery regulation awards and any impact that these attenuation factors might have on pricing. So here is the results we saw for the regulation up commodity. We did see kind of a bigger percentage change than we saw for the energy, especially in certain hours towards the peak. But the impact on the regulation up price for CAISO as a whole was fairly muted as well. Next slide, please. We saw a fairly similar thing for regulation down. We do see some greater impact in the really low attenuation factor cases. So in the 10 and 25% attenuation factor cases, we do see an increase in the battery reg down awards and some impact on the CAISO reg down pricing through the middle of the day. But but those effects kind of leveled out as we got to 40, 55% attenuation factors and didn't change too much more from there. Next slide, please. I think that is it for now. So yeah, let's open it up to those questions.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And I know we only have about 10 minutes left in the scheduled time today, but we will run over to complete the presentation. So if you're able to stick around, please do. If not, this session is being recorded, so that'll be available on the website. And you know, this won't be the last time we have these discussions as we build on the analysis. So let's go ahead and unmute Kathleen's line.
Thanks. I'll be brief. Kathleen from Vistra. Thanks so much, Scott. I enjoyed these slides very much. There is a slide that you went over that I particularly liked back, I think, slide 47. I don't see it on the presentation that was posted online. Isabella, is that something that you think could be updated so we could have this slide?
Yeah, we can update the presentation.
That would be great. Thank you so much. A follow-up on this slide. This was great. I also really like this way of looking at this. I wanted to see if it's possible in a future meeting if you could replicate a similar view. The scenario I'd love to see, because I noticed if you look at your state of charge up and down, the SOCU and SOC down, they don't hit the max or the min SOC range. It would be really helpful to see a scenario that's more of a stress test rather than kind of a normal case where we see what would happen on a given day where you're more fully cycling that asset, needing to use the whole range. So hitting one of those SOCUs or SOC down. Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah, so we actually do hit the SOCU in hour ending 11 and 12. So that's where that shaded blue area goes all the way down to 0. But yeah, we could try to make that more clear and
yeah, that would be great. I kind of want to see it hit earlier so we can get a better sense of basically whether or not the storage can recover. So if you've hit one boundary, can we move back into if we hit one of these boundaries, does the market allow us to change modes to move back into our mid-range? That's the scenario I'm kind of trying to test.
okay. Yeah, we can take that back. Thanks.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, can we move to Chen-Yu?
You hear me? Can
yes,
you hear
we
me?
can.
Oh, okay. Hey, Scott, can go back to page 47, slide 47. I thought I saw and then before that, I thought the SOCD has to be less than or equal to the SOC. Then there's interval 3 to 5, looks like it is larger than the 50, right? I don't know if my understanding or is that something
Yes, that's a good question. So the SOCD has to be less than or equal to the SOC max. So the SOC max in our kind of just toy example here was 100 megawatt hours. So it wouldn't be able to go above 100.
Oh, okay. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Can we unmute Callie's line? Maybe we can come back to Callie. Can we unmute Robert Fisher?
Hi, it's Callie Wells. I'm not sure if you wanted to they just unmuted me. Do you want me to hold off?
Go ahead.
We can hear you, Callie.
First? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Callie.
They never unmuted me, but hopefully Robert doesn't mind me jumping in first. Actually, I had a similar question or ask of Kathleen back on slide 47. It would be great to see an example where either we hit that SOC upper the U or D earlier, or I don't know if you have the data and you can just extend this horizon and we can see kind of intervals 1 through 12 of the next trade hour. I think either one of those I would love to see, because I think we've been asking for something similar in the storage effort, but it looks like you guys might have the example already here that would help with that. But I did actually have another question. I thought I heard when you were going through the scenarios where you changed the attenuation factor. First, can you confirm you said that when the attenuation factor was higher, we also saw higher prices, clearing prices?
Yeah, could we go to
Sorry, I didn't make note of the slide number.
Are you talking about imbalance reserve or a particular product?
Yeah, imbalance reserves, please. Let's go with the up. I feel like I saw it.
So let's just go to the IRU, which is, let's see, slide 52. If we could go to slide 52. Oh, sorry, one more. Two back, sorry. Do one.
Yes, okay, so
yeah.
Higher attenuation factor, higher prices. Is that how I'm reading this?
Yeah, that's correct. So when we see a higher attenuation factor for the batteries, we see the batteries providing significantly lower imbalance reserves. And that's because more of their state of charge has to be kind of committed anytime they do provide that IRU award. So the opportunity cost they have of providing other commodities or using limited charge for something else later in the day, the cost of that goes into that dispatch when the market is trying to optimize exactly what the best use of that battery is over the course of the whole day. So when it's harder to provide that IRU, when it's kind of more costly from the SOC standpoint, we see the batteries providing less IRU. And when we have less IRU available from the batteries, we see an increase in the overall IRU price.
Okay, so I appreciate you confirming that. So then my question is, did we also see an increase in the market hitting that demand curve? So higher attenuation factor, higher prices, but we're actually not procuring the full requirement as much. So I was curious about that relationship.
Yes, we go that way.
Sorry, Scott, you're breaking up a little bit, but I think the answer there was yes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
It's a little choppy. You may want to try turning off your video. It might help.
You can confirm for me later, but I think I heard yes. Higher attenuation factor, higher prices, more instances of the market hitting that demand curve and not actually procuring the full requirement.
Yeah, sorry about the connection issue.
No,
if you can go back to slide 50, actually, we tried to show this with this example when we compared the 10% to the 85%. So you can see on these slides that we are procuring significantly more from the demand curve in that 85% attenuation factor case. The attenuation or the demand curve procurement is that gray bar on top. So we didn't show all the attenuation factor cases, but here are two from either end of the spectrum which show that increased demand curve procurement.
Okay, that's exactly where I was wondering, is if maybe you have the same chart kind of for the attenuation factors in between, because if we're talking about maybe where to set that in my mind seems to be kind of a trade-off, or some different implications that we want to think through as to what an appropriate attenuation factor would be, or if we want to make adjustments to it. So yeah, the data in between those two cases would be great. Same chart. Thank you.
Sure, thanks for that feedback.
Okay, can we unmute Robert Fisher?
Hi, this is Robert Fisher with NV Energy. Nice presentation, Scott. Appreciate the help. From an EIM perspective, I'm looking at slide 46 and 47 on the attenuation factor. For EIMs, are the self-schedules for spin, non-spin, reg up, and reg down going to be considered in this for the I'll call them EIM entities, for non-CAISO entities?
That is a great question, and I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay, yeah, I'd appreciate it because we didn't follow along, or I know I didn't follow along with the policy in regards to much of the envelope constraint because it was mostly related to ancillary services and CAISO. So looking at this equation, it would be great if I could get that clarification so that we could adjust appropriately.
Okay, yeah, I think the answer might be no, but we'll have to follow up on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and Chris Devon.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Thanks, Isabella. Yeah, this is Chris Devon with Calpine. I just had a question on slide 52, where CAISO is making a conclusion about the imbalance reserve being provided by solar more often. And I guess to try to understand that a little bit further, I was wondering, could you explain where those bids from the solar are coming from? Is that you may have covered this earlier in the call and I had missed it. But you know, is this coming from some actual bids, recent bids that solar have provided, or is this something that CAISO's used from, you know, earlier prior data? Just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. We are going to get more into the bids in the next section. We don't currently have any IRU and IRD bids because they don't currently exist in the market. So we do have to make some assumptions on the bidding. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to add on to that.
Well, yeah, and Scott, so thanks for that. And so I guess to expand on that, so you would have to be, you know, using some of the energy bids from the solar units if they're bidding economically, right, to try to formulate these curves, most likely, I would imagine. So if that's what CAISO's done, that would be helpful just to understand, you know, like what dates or what kind of time frame you were looking at. Was it from this past summer? Was it prior years? Those sort of things.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, hopefully you'll get a little more info on that in the next section. But yeah, it's definitely had to make some assumptions going into what the bids would look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially when they're, you know, the solar is going to be having some other impacts on the opportunity costs of producing energy here. So I was just trying to understand how nuanced this analysis really is. I think I'll wait to ask anything else further until I see the rest of the presentation. Thanks for your time.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Okay. All right, thanks, Scott. Well, with that, we'll turn it to Oswin to go over our last section today.
Thanks, Isabella. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, so in this section, we'll explore market impacts on what happens when we change the input side of the imbalance bid prices. So the benchmark case was the case that was first shown, and also the previous section that Scott showed. We had imbalance bids that were seeded in the map stage environment, and with bid prices scattered all over from $0 to $55, the bid price cap. And for this specific section, what we want to explore was what happens when we set these input IR bid prices for both the IRU and the IRD commodity to a specific set of values. So the values that we will use are from 0 all the way to 55. We want to use a very simple case where we will just set the same price for all the resources and see what happens. That's like the extreme case where all the resources are submitting just $0. So it's a free IRU and IRD supply from these resources. And also the other extreme case where all the bits are set at $55, and we have 3 cases where the bits are scattered between a range of 0 to 20, 20 to 40, and 40 to 55. So given these input set of scenarios, we want to see what happens to the energy pricing, the IRU pricing, and the IRD pricing. Go to the next slide. Okay, so what you're seeing on the right here are the different scenarios where the IR bit prices are all the way from $0 to $55, and also the 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 55 cases spread in between these two extremes. So what we generally see is that IRU prices are going up as the bit prices are increased. This is as expected. As you make the supply of IRU more expensive, you are going to see higher pricing at the BA level. And one thing that you can see here is that even when the IRU bits are $0, you do see that the prices are non-zero. So this is because of the opportunity cost, the interplay between energy. If we have infinite IRU supply bits at $0, maybe we can see $0 the whole day, but there is a restriction on how much IR capacity is available and how much is going to be used for IRU and for energy. So all these factors can lead to situations where even when all the bits are at $0, if they are not do not have enough volume or capacity, the demand curve procurement comes in and sets a non-zero price. And the other situation is also true, where even when all the bits are at $55, if the price from the demand curve is less than $55, you would see a lower price. And we can see that also in this $55 scenario, where the price goes below $55 in a few hours. But in general, what we're seeing from these analysis is that as you start increasing the input bit prices, the BA level IRU prices are going up. Go to the next slide, Isabella. So the next slide will show the same similar chart for the PAC BAs, PACE and PAC West. So same thing as we concluded last time, where if you increase the bid prices, the IRU prices are going to go up. And in some cases, you will see flat lines for the whole day. And when there are flat lines here, that means that the economic the prices being set by the resources that are marginal for the entire day. And when you see prices that are going away from the flat line, that's when the demand curve is coming in, or when there is congestion in the IRU scenario, like Jenny mentioned. You can go to the next slide. Okay, and same thing with IRD. IRD prices are going up as the IRU prices are input bit prices are increased. And I specifically want to choose 2 scenarios here. One is when the input bit price is $0 and for hour ending 8. And this is a case where there is requirement in feasibility and the price is set by the demand curve. And for hour ending 18, where congestion comes in and sets a non-zero price for the IRD scenario. Okay, go to the next slide. Okay, and this is the analysis for the PACE and the PACWest PAs. Similar observations here when the input bid prices are being increased from $0 to $55, we see the prices going up. Okay. Go to the next slide. Okay. And so this is a scenario for the cleared values where I'm showing you 2 scenarios, 2 extremes, where IRU bid prices are 0 and IRU bid prices are $55. And you will naturally see that when the prices are very high at $55, the demand curves are procuring majority of the supply, whereas when you have $0, the cleared value is very similar to what Scott showed in the previous section. Go to the next slide, please. Okay. So similar behavior here with the IRD. where the cleared price, the cleared IRD value is procured more evenly throughout other resources. And when the price is $55, the IRD price is procured from the demand curve. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, and another observation that we saw was that the energy prices are not too sensitive to IRU and IRD bid prices. And what we can generally observe is that when the IR prices are higher, that kind of increases energy supply availability because more of energy can be procured instead of procuring IR. So that could lower the EN price. And there is also IR procurement from storage resources that can impact energy indirectly through the SOC constraints. Okay, go to the next slide, please. Okay, same observations for the PAC BAA, where the prices are constant or between a range between PAC East and PAC West. And also in all of these cases, what we also see is that there is an healthy buffer of supply available to meet the relatively moderate level of demand. So when we run future analysis with high load conditions or stressed cases, we might start seeing more impacts of the IRU bid prices on the energy pricing here. So I think that is my last slide, and I will take questions.
Can we unmute Jordan Miner, please?
Hi, thank you, Jordan Miner, CPUC. Just going back to the last two slides, I think it's 66 and 67. I just want to confirm that this price data is also from 10.4, which is the data that was modeled earlier.
Correct. That's correct, Jordan. But the data for 10.4 that is published on Oasis will be for the 85% attenuation factor case.
Okay, great. And then I just want to request that when you guys do more analysis, could you do a high load and low load day also? That's it.
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Looks like we have one from Steve Keen.
Hi, Steve Keen from Edison. You said that if the bid prices are at 55, that the clearing price can be less than that. If that happens, are the entities eligible to get bid cost recovery since they bid 55, but they're being paid less than that?
I'll have to take this back, Steve. But if anybody else on the call has information. Yeah, that's a good question, Steve. We'll take it back and follow up. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, not seeing any, so I think we can move to next steps. Thank you, Osman. All right, so in terms of next steps, we have a tentative schedule for the future working group sessions. So our next session will be held on November 20th, and then monthly thereafter. So December 18th, January 29th, February 26th, and March 26th. So all of these dates are tentative until confirmed through a notice in the daily briefing. So I encourage you just to subscribe to that publication if you aren't already. And then if we can go to the next slide, just a reminder that we will have a comment period open following the working group. It will be open until November 4th, and we'll be posting the comments template here probably tomorrow morning for you all to utilize. If you have any questions, though, you can reach out to isostakeholderaffairs@kaiso.com. Any questions on those items? Okay. We appreciate your participation today, and thanks for hanging with us while we ran about 15 minutes late. With that, I will turn things over to Christina. I think she has a few more updates to provide before we close out today. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Isabella. I just have a few announcements before we wrap up. Here's some meetings occurring this week at the ISO. Here's some market simulation meetings occurring this week, along with a link to BPM updates. And lastly, for insights into the ISO grid and market operations, please be on the lookout for our Energy Matters blog. Here you can see our latest blog posts regarding preparing for winter, and as well as making energy emissions more transparent. So with that, we'd like to thank you so much for joining today's meeting. As a reminder, this meeting was recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. All meeting materials and the video recording will be posted soon. We thank you very much, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.
This event has concluded. Thank you for using event services. You may now disconnect.